How about that? Thank you, Benita. Good day, good people, and welcome to Contemplative Inner Being. This is Revolutionary Belovedness, and whether you are watching a live session or watching a recording, thank you so much for being part of this community. It's always good to do the audio check before you get too far in. Thank you all so much for helping with that. Our topic this evening is the inner work of love for self. As I often say, you cannot give what you ain't got, and so it's very important that we do this inner work of love for self to recognize our revolutionary belovedness so that we can give that as well to others and to the community. Before let's see, how do I want to do this evening? I want to change it up just a little bit. What I want to do is I'm going to share with you our dialogue questions that we'll take time with at the end, but at least I can kind of plant that seed so that you'll have something to think about through the reflection, and then we can come back to those questions at the end and talk about how you might respond to those. So the first one is, what does love for self feel like in lived experience rather than just an idea or value? Second, which limits, unfinished places, or inner voices in you are currently asking to be met with patience rather than improvement? Also, third, how has inner harshness or self-pressure shaped your relationships or patterns of engagement? And what shifts when compassion becomes your inner posture? Fourth, in what ways might tending your own vulnerability more faithfully support your capacity to remain present, courageous, and loving in the wider world? So tonight we enter into this work of the inner work of love for self, cultivating compassion towards one's own wounds, our own limits, our own humanity. Let's take a moment to center down, to settle into a posture that feels supportive and kind to the body. Allow the spine to lengthen in a natural way as if the body remembers how to be held. Bring awareness to the rhythm of breathing, sensing the gentle rise and fall that has carried life through every season. Let attention rest where the body feels most present. And friends, invite a quality of friendliness toward this moment, toward the body as it is, toward the inner life as it unfolds. Allow your heart to soften into a sense of being met exactly here. Just remain in this awareness for a few breaths, trusting that this simple presence already participates in love. Friends, the work of love always begins close to home. It begins in the intimate territory of the inner life, where sensations, memories, longings, disappointments, and quiet strategies of survival shape how the world is met. Love for self does not refer to admiration or self-regard shaped by comparison. It actually points toward a compassionate attentiveness that recognizes one's own humanity as worthy of care, patience, and tenderness. And this work forms the soil from which all other expressions of love draw their nourishment. Many people arrive on a spiritual path carrying an unspoken assumption that love becomes real only when directed outward. Service, generosity, and sacrifice often receive the most honor, while the inner world is approached as something to manage, improve, or transcend. Yet the heart learns love through direct experience. The way a person relates inwardly establishes the pattern by which others are encountered. Inner harshness tends to echo outward, even when intentions remain sincere. Inner compassion cultivates a spaciousness that naturally extends beyond the self. The invitation of this session rests in recognizing that self-compassion is an act of courage. Turning toward our own wounds, our own limits, those unfinished places within ourselves, that requires honesty and trust. And it asks for a willingness to remain present with vulnerability rather than reaching immediately for resolution or progress. This presence becomes a form of reverence for the life that has been given, that has been shaped through joy, sorrow, failure, and resilience alike. This kind of reverence allows pain to be held with a larger field of care. A deeper emphasis on love for self invites attention to the earliest places where compassion was interrupted. Many inner wounds formed in moments when safety, recognition, or tenderness felt uncertain, and these moments shaped strategies for belonging and protection. Approaching them with gentleness allows their original intelligence to be honored. What once guarded life can be thanked and gradually softened. And this honoring restores dignity to the inner world and loosens the grip of shame. Spiritual traditions across cultures consistently point toward mature self-knowledge as a foundation for wisdom. And self-knowledge grows through gentle observation rather than that relentless scrutiny. And it develops when attention is offered with curiosity and warmth. The inner world becomes a place of learning rather than judgment. Those patterns that were once labeled as failures reveal themselves as adaptation shaped by real conditions. Wounds begin to speak as teachers, offering insight into unmet needs and long-held fears. Love for self recognizes the intelligence carried within the body. The body remembers experiences that were never fully captured by words. Sensations, postures, reflexive responses, and rhythms tell a story about how life has been lived. So approaching the body with kindness allows these stories to be heard. Compassion toward bodily experience grounds our spirituality in lived reality. It affirms that the path of transformation includes breath, fatigue, pleasure, resistance, and rest. And so the work of self-compassion includes befriending the inner resistance, because resistance often carries wisdom about pacing and safety. Listening to it with patience reveals where the soul asks for steadiness before movement. And so this listening reframes resistance as communication rather than obstruction. The heart learns to negotiate change collaboratively rather than forcefully. And this kind of collaboration strengthens our inner trust and supports lasting integration. Inner compassion opens space for grief to be honored. And grief appears wherever love has been present. Whether it's loss, disappointment, regret, they all mark the places where care has been invested deeply. And so allowing grief to be felt affirms the depth of love that already exists. Tears become a language of devotion rather than a sign of weakness. And this honoring of grief integrates the past into the present with dignity and tenderness. Humility then emerges naturally through self-compassion. It arises as clarity about what can be offered and what remains unfinished. This clarity frees the heart from the burden of perfection. Our limits no longer appear as deficiencies to overcome, but as invitations into relationship and interdependence. The wisdom of limits teaches discernment, aligning action with capacity and care. And our inner compassion reshapes the experience of time, because the urgency will give way to patience. Growth becomes understood as a gradual unfolding rather than a project to complete. And the heart learns to trust processes that mature slowly. Tenderness even comes to a time where it replaces self-pressure. And life begins to feel less like a test and more like a relationship that unfolds through presence. The practice of love for self invites a new relationship with inner voices. Critical narratives often arise from a desire for safety or belonging. And when these are met with compassion, these voices soften and reveal the fears beneath their urgency. So listening with kindness allows our nervous system to settle. The inner climate becomes more hospitable. And from this hospitality arises a sense of being accompanied rather than managed. And so as compassion deepens, the inner world becomes less divided. Parts of the self that once felt exiled or hidden find a place within awareness. Integration restores coherence and wholeness, and that energy previously spent on self-protection, well, that energy becomes available for creativity and connection. The heart learns to rest in its own company, giving rise to a quiet confidence grounded in authenticity. Love for self also clarifies boundaries. Compassion respects the rhythms of energy and the need for replenishment. Clear boundaries protect the capacity to love by honoring the body and spirit's need for care. Saying yes and saying no both become expressions of integrity. And so discernment grows more trustworthy as it becomes rooted in kindness rather than fear. And that inner compassion transforms the experience of failure. Those moments of misalignment or harm become opportunities for learning rather than occasions for collapsing into shame. And accountability grows from care rather than threat. Repair becomes more possible because the heart remains open to growth. Resilience strengthens through repeated experiences of being met with understanding. And so as the inner relationship heals, outward relationships shift organically. Because you can't give what you ain't got. Patience with others increases, listening deepens, reactivity softens. Compassion offered inwardly becomes available as a shared resource rather than a personal achievement. And so the world is met from a place of grounded presence. Love flows with steadiness because it arises from a well that is tended. Tend to your well. Friends, the inner work of love is what prepares the ground for courageous engagement with the world. A heart acquainted with its own tenderness recognizes the humanity of others more readily. Judgment loosens its grip. Curiosity expands. Differences are approached with openness rather than threat. And this presence anchors the broader work of justice and reconciliation and empathy. Self-compassion aligns spirituality with truth. It keeps practice rooted in lived experience rather than idealization. So prayer, silence, and reflection serve to deepen awareness rather than bypass it. The full range of human experience is honored as sacred terrain. The cultivation of love for self expresses trust in the wisdom of love itself. Let me say that again. The cultivation of love for self is what expresses trust in the wisdom of love itself. Care, offered inwardly, participates in the same movement that sustains communities and heals societies. This work equips the heart to meet suffering with steadiness and resilience. And so compassion becomes sustainable because it is replenished from within. I hope you are beginning to sense this revolutionary belovedness. And in this light, the inner work of love appears as an essential dimension of spiritual maturity. It invites a lifelong practice of returning to kindness again and again in ever-deepening ways. And by the way, don't confuse kindness with niceness. Friends, each return to kindness strengthens the capacity to remain present with complexity. Each act of self-compassion contributes to a larger culture of care. This practice, this awareness, this truth of love for self honors the truth that every life unfolds through vulnerability. And meeting that vulnerability with tenderness aligns the heart with its deepest calling. So the path of revolutionary belovedness begins here, in the quiet courage to treat one's own humanity as worthy of patience, mercy, and abiding care. Perhaps this is why we read in Scripture, "You are the light of the world." And friends, this inner work matures through repetition rather than mastery. Again and again, attention returns to the places where the heart tightens or withdraws. And each return becomes an act of devotion. So over time, this steady kindness, this loving kindness, this hesed, reshapes your inner posture. And what once felt fragile gains resilience through being accompanied. And the soul learns that it can remain present even when answers remain incomplete. And friends, love for self also refines moral imagination. Maybe you remember that conversation from last week. As compassion is practiced inwardly, empathy expands outwardly. The capacity to recognize the dignity of others strengthens through intimate knowledge of one's own tenderness. This connection reveals how easily harm arises from unexamined pain. Inner healing thus participates directly in the work of justice, shaping action through humility and restraint. The discipline of self-compassion protects spiritual life from becoming performative. The inner work of love protects the spiritual life from becoming performative. Let me just have my checklist of behaviors to go out and do. You cannot give what you do not have. The inner work of love keeps attention grounded in truth rather than aspiration alone. Spiritual maturity then expresses itself as congruence between inner posture and outer action, contemplation and action. And what is practiced in silence shapes how one listens, how one speaks, and how one responds in public life. Over time, love for self becomes less an effort and more a way of being. Kindness begins to arise spontaneously. Presence feels less strained. The heart rests more naturally in trust. And this ease does not signal completion. It actually reflects a growing confidence in love's capacity to hold complexity. A growing confidence in love's capacity to hold complexity. So in this way, the inner work of love serves as a continual source of renewal. It sustains courage when engagement feels costly. It nourishes patience when change unfolds slowly. It anchors hope beyond outcomes. So through this steady return to compassion, life itself becomes a teacher, guiding your heart into the deeper alignment with care, dignity, belonging, and revolutionary belovedness. I want to invite us into just 1 minute of silence together as we prepare to move into a guided inquiry. When we come out of that silence, if there are any comments or questions, we'll take just a minute to give space to those and then move into the guided inquiry. So please take a gentle, deep breath, and let's share just a minute of silence together. If there are any comments, reflections, questions, anything at all you'd like to share before we move into the guided inquiry, please feel free to put those in the chat section now. After the guided inquiry, we will have some time for dialogue. I actually have 4 questions to help prompt that dialogue. Okay. Let's begin with a guided meditation. Just settle into the body as it is. Allow it to arrive without adjustment or correction. Feel the surface beneath you offering steady support. Holding your weight with quiet faithfulness. Notice where the body meets the ground or chair. Sensing contact, pressure, and temperature. Allow the breath to move at its own pace, neither guided nor restrained. Sense that gentle rhythm that has accompanied you through countless moments, sustaining life in ways both seen and unseen. And just let the awareness soften. Let the face soften, the jaws soften, the shoulders soften, the belly and the hands soften. Notice any places that feel guarded or tight, and allow your attention to rest there kindly. Invite a quality of friendliness toward the body exactly as it arrives in this moment. There is no task to complete here. There is no state to achieve. There is only the invitation to remain. Our practice now is simply understanding that love begins inwardly. Compassion grows as presence learns to stay with what feels tender, unfinished, or unsure. Inner love does not rush toward clarity. It learns how to linger. Allow your attention to turn gently toward your inner landscape. And notice what is most alive right now beneath the surface of thought. Perhaps it arrives as a sensation, a mood, an image, a color, a subtle movement. Just let it reveal itself in its own language without translation. Where does it live in your body? What texture or weight does it carry? Is it dense or spacious, warm or cool, steady or pulsing? Allow your breath to respond naturally as you stay with this experience. And if your mind begins to explain or interpret, just gently return to sensation. If emotion rises, allow it to move like weather across the body. Notice where the body tightens, where it softens, where it holds its breath. Let your nervous system sense that this moment is being met with care. Nothing here is too much. Nothing here is unwelcome. Now, gently invite your awareness toward places of inner grief. These may be old disappointments, missed chances, losses, or quiet sorrows that have never fully been named. And you may notice grief in the body as heaviness, or ache, warmth, pressure. Simply let grief be present as an expression of love. And notice how your body responds when grief is simply allowed space rather than managed. Notice any impulse you might have to move away or to fix or explain or to become numb. and offer patience to that impulse. Let your presence remain steady, anchored, and kind. Grief does not ask to be solved. It asks to be accompanied. So stay with the body as it holds what has mattered. Now bring awareness and sense where the body signals pause, caution, or hesitation, any types of inner resistance. And notice how that resistance shows itself. Perhaps as tightening, withdrawal, fatigue, or maybe a desire to look elsewhere. Listen to this place with respect and ask quietly what it protects. Ask what it needs in order to feel safe. Ask what it needs in order to soften. And then allow gratitude to arise for the ways this resistance has preserved life. And feel what shifts when resistance is honored rather than pushed. Notice if the body responds with a subtle release, a deeper breath, or a sense of relief. And from this place, invite a simple phrase to form inwardly. Let it be brief and gentle, something like, "You belong here," or "This is allowed," or "You are held." And let that phrase settle into the body. Now notice how the heart responds. Allow the words of that phrase to sink beneath thought and into sensation. Breathing in, I I meet my own humanity. Breathing out, I offer tenderness. Breathing in, I feel what aches. Breathing out, I allow care. Let us take this into the silence for a couple of minutes together. Breathing in, I meet my own humanity. Breathing out, I offer tenderness. Breathing in, I feel what aches. Breathing out, I allow care. Friends, take a moment to sense the space around the body once more. Notice the sounds, the light, and movement returning to awareness. Feel free to open your eyes if you haven't already. Feel the support beneath you again. Some slight body movement is helpful to return your awareness. Wiggling toes and fingers, moving head and neck and shoulders. And may we carry this quality of the inner work of love for self into any space we return to in the days to come. I am now going to share 4 questions to kind of prompt some group dialogue. These questions will also be in the recordings section of the Mighty Network so that you can return to them if you'd like to journal for one or more of them or share them with a friend. The first one is, what does love for self feel like in a lived experience rather than just as an idea or value? Feel free to type any short responses you want to share in the chat as well. Second is, which limits, unfinished places, or inner voices in you are currently asking to be met with patience rather than improvement? Third, how has inner harshness or self-pressure shaped your relationships or patterns of engagement? And what shifts when compassion becomes the inner posture? And then fourth is, in what ways might tending to your own vulnerability more faithfully support your capacity to remain present, courageous, and loving in the wider world? And if anyone would like to give any type of response to any of those, or if you have something else that you would like to share, the chat section is open. All right, friends, again, whether you are here for the live session or you are watching the recording, thank you so much for participating in this. The recording will be on Mighty Network and on YouTube. Until then, may you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. And may you be peaceful. Good night for now. Thank you again so much. And I hope to see you again soon. Good night to all.